Just got done with my interview with Montana State senior quarterback Tommy Mellott, who's just coming off a huge Week 0 road win at New Mexico, Montana State's first win over an FBS opponent since 2006. And this is a player that is in the top 10 across multiple statistical categories at a school that's been playing football since 1897 at Montana State. We talked everything from being a small town kid from Montana to the story and the mentality behind the comeback win against New Mexico this past weekend. We also touched on a whole bunch of other things, Montana State's football traditions like the Gold Rush game and the Brawl of the Wild, along with life in Bozeman and just a few other things. And I really could have spoken to him for hours on so many things, but it is game week. He has quite the class schedule from what I understand, so I'm grateful that we got to paint a little bit of a picture of his story and what he's all about, along with giving everyone a glimpse into the taste the state of Montana has for football, something that, I bet most people who identify as avid college football fans likely aren't aware of. So they'll be heading to St. George, Utah to face Utah Tech this weekend. And for all the Montana State fans that are going to listen to this, I'm sure all of this is going to make you even more proud that he's your guy at the helm. And for those less familiar with Montana State and the football culture out there, I hope Tommy's story gets you to explore not only his journey as one of college football's best players, but also the rich football culture in Big Sky Country, Montana. So hope you enjoy it. Tommy Mellott, quarterback, Montana State Bobcats, coming off first win against an FBS opponent since 2006. Congratulations for that, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Jorge. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started, right off the bat. You're a small town Montana kid, Butte, Montana. Can you just talk about what life was like growing up, when you got introduced to football, and when you started playing and all that?
Yeah, growing up in Butte, luckily enough, my grandpa was a big football influence for me. Gene Fogarty, he was a coach, he was a player, all sorts of things. Local middle schools, sports facilities named after him, and so he was the biggest college football fan growing up. He'd have a yellow, the yellow sheets. He'd have all of the statistics that he'd write down from books he would read, and he was really my biggest influence. Neither of my parents, my dad didn't play football. My mom ran track in middle school, but he was my big influence for athletics and for football specifically. And yeah, just going through middle school and middle school, elementary school, both those things. I just love sports, all of them. But football was the top of my list. And then when I got to high school, had a big influence with my the local high school, the local public high school with the head coach Eric Gray.
I watched back some college game day clips when they're there in 2022, and a quote really stuck out to me that I think you would agree with in terms of the state of Montana's taste for football between University of Montana and Montana State. The quote is, "We love that our rosters are filled not with future NFL prospects, but often mountain kids, farm kids from communities so small none have more than a single traffic light." So I'm sure you could resonate with that quote. Based off of that, can you just describe what football means there at a town like Butte, Montana, being the local star? Because, I mean, let's face it, Montana is not a state that the rest of the country usually looks at to be a football crazed community. So, what does it all mean there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, growing up, it's one or the other. You and I, I always bled blue and gold growing up. So it was just, my high school coach. He went to MSU. Well, two of them did. And when I got to my junior year of high school, it was just coming to a realization that football would possibly soon be over with for me. And that was really my first time really thinking about trying to get an opportunity to play at a Division 1 school, and like you said, there's not a whole lot of recruiting down out of Montana. There's few and far between that go off to any Group of Five, any Power 5 outside of Montana. Obviously other than the two schools here, and so yeah, I was, obviously just doing everything I possibly could to get recruited by these guys, and met the world when I got that offer, and I knew it was clear and set that I'd be coming over to Bozeman and playing for the blue and gold.
I did some research on your 24/7 page. Only offers that were listed there were Montana State and Montana. Looked through your Twitter a little bit. Looks like you just kind of visited, even the Montana Techs and those smaller schools too. Went over to Washington State, it looks like. But when it came to deciding between those two schools, first of all, were there any other ones, in the Division One level that had offered you? The other thing I wanted to ask was what was the deciding factor for Montana State?
Yeah, no. So yeah, you're right. I certainly had offers from the local NAIA schools, Montana Tech, Western, Carroll, a couple, around the state. And then, but the only Division One schools that I really ever talked to extensively with, about an offer, a real opportunity to play at their school was U of M and MSU. Washington State, they did give me a, junior day invite, and we certainly took that opportunity to go check it out. But yeah, just with the recruiting stuff, it was, sending emails, trying to find opportunities to see if anybody would give me a shot. Because at that point, my junior year, I really wasn't talking to either MSU or U of M. But I just wanted to see what I could do. But yeah, I mean, just a deciding factor. Like I said, the state's very, very divided. And if you see geographically, Butte is really at the middle of it all. It's kind of that, leans one way or the other. It's the cross of I-15 and I-90, two of the biggest interstates in the country, collide right there and just kind of splits the state almost in half population-wise to some extent. And, it was, I grew up and one of my role models, Colt Anderson, he actually played safety over at the University of Montana before playing in the NFL, ultimately coming back and coaching at Butte High my senior year. And now he's a special teams coordinator in the NFL. So he was a big influence to me, but ultimately, when I was getting recruited, Coach Choate and his staff were here, Coach BJ Robertson, and those guys made a really big impact on me. I saw where this program was going. Obviously, there's so many different opportunities that they've grown over at MSU with the Bobcat Athletic facility, the BAC over here, Bobcat Athletic Complex, and they got the indoor facility coming up right behind our stadium. All the additions to the stadium coming up here soon, and just the university in general just thriving. Academics was a big thing for me. Like you said, it's not necessarily future NFL prospects, but when I made that decision, it was, I knew that I would be going to Montana State because, among other things, like I said, the coaching staff and the facilities and growing as a football team, I'd be getting a great education. And ultimately, that's my idea when I came here was hopefully at some point I could play. But it's kind of few and far between, that I've ever seen anybody play quarterback from Montana, go to Montana State would actually play. So I certainly had that aspiration, but it was, education was the biggest thing. And I'd give everything I possibly could to have an opportunity to play on a Saturday.
So I wasn't going to ask about this, but I feel like I have to. You did mention academics, financial engineering. I have never seen that major before. Can you just
Yeah.
quickly explain what that entails? Because I almost thought that was like written wrong or something in the bio.
No, it's definitely a little bit condescending that the name of it. It's, most universities, they call it quantitative finance, but essentially it's just more than numbers based and statistics based, a lot of simulation, a lot of trials with computer science and general economic theory. There's very few universities that have that as an actual undergrad program, but they decided to, take it on here at Montana State. And I didn't ultimately come here because of that major, but I knew I wanted to do something math, STEM based that was, likely somewhere in engineering. And that was a great one, that was able to work it with my schedule of football. The time, the Saturdays, you don't really have them off. So those group projects, mechanical engineering, civil engineering, they're tough to find, time to really meet with your group mates, whatever it might be for a project. But financial engineering is a lot more, based by yourself. And so just kind of the crossroads of, math, economics, computer science, and statistics.
Nice. Yeah, we are opposites in that department. I'm a writer. I'm reading comprehension and no math. So recruiting all that. You make a decision. You get to Montana State. 2020. You guys aren't playing football, so I imagine we could go down a whole rabbit hole on that. A lot of lifting, probably a lot of meetings, and probably just really weird times. But 2021 comes around. I read that you're playing a little bit of special teams. You're getting in some receiver work and then you get your first start at quarterback in the FCS playoffs, first games against University of Tennessee Martin, and it's just like this meteoric rise to success. I even think I saw that against Sam Houston in those playoffs, you scored a rushing touchdown, a passing touchdown, and a receiving touchdown in like the first 15 minutes of the game. So it happened quick for you. And you were the local hero. You're the hometown Montana kid. I mean, I'm seeing that they started selling the Touchdown Tommy t-shirts all over Bozeman. Was it overwhelming? Did you take it well? Can you just describe what that was like?
Yeah, like you said, all those different positions, it was overwhelming for sure throughout majority of the season. Trying to figure out how to play wide receiver, how to go out and run down on special teams and make plays where I really haven't done those things since middle school. I was always, I was really just a one-way guy even through high school. And so, but, just my athletic abilities and what the coaches saw fit, they wanted to give me an opportunity to see the field. And that's where they saw it at. And then ultimately, yeah, I had an opportunity to play that my very first start at quarterback was the playoff game, and I remember it was like 35-mile-per-hour winds. It was a very unfavorable situation with that, but they just the coaching staff put me in a good position with that game, and ultimately, to be honest with you, the win really probably gave Sam Houston a pretty awful scout on me because the 35-mile-per-hour winds, I think we threw for like 50 yards that game because it was just like the worst conditions ever. And so when we went down to Sam Houston, I'm sure that they were like, yeah, this guy can't throw. They're just going to run the ball. We're going to play man. We played man all year long. We got the best corners. We got the best nickels and, best man-on-man matchups. And we just had receivers go out there and make plays the entire time is what I remember. Lance McCutcheon, Nate Stewart, those two guys, come to mind for sure. Willie Patterson, all three of those guys, I think every single 50-50 ball was more like a 90-10. I think we completed 90% of them somehow throughout the entire playoff series. A lot of that success, it was absolutely incredible. And now that I look back at it, it's very improbable, certainly. Our defense and the wide receivers and those guys really made a bunch of plays to make it easy for me. But no, it was really one of the most it was one of the most insane times of my life. With all those things going around Bozeman, selling shirts and everybody super excited about what I'm doing and what our offense is doing. And at that point, I was just running around trying to make plays. I didn't know anything about our offense. I didn't know other than just to throw the ball and give those guys a chance. I didn't know much. So it was really just to throw the ball up in the air and go make a play, really.
And a lot of what I'm fascinated about football there in Montana is it's like a whole hidden world of crazy fandom and worship. Like they love the Grizz and they love the Bobcats out there. I mean, during that time, was it hard to just go to the supermarket and get some groceries? Did you have to? Was it hard to just go out and get something to eat out in town? Like, what was that like in terms of the whole celebrity aspect of it?
Yeah, no, like you said, Montana is a state without a professional football team. So, well, as student athletes, we really get to feel almost that celebrity status, which is certainly unreal. But, when you have these communities that really all they do is farm all week over in the eastern Montana, they want to come down and enjoy their weekend and go watch the Bobcats play. And so you have the opportunity to let those guys relax and enjoy a Saturday afternoon and they revere you for it to some extent. And so no, yeah, I was certainly going around to all the different everywhere I went. There's people coming up to me and congratulating me and talking to me, whatever it might be. And they're small towns, and so and I've obviously lived here my entire life, so people know who I am. They come up to me no matter how much or how little I might know them, and give me a speech, really tell me what they think about what we should be doing on offense, or what they think about anything really. So no, absolutely, yeah. Everywhere I went, there's people tap me on my shoulder, asking me how things are going.
Yeah, no, I'd imagine that to be the case. I mean, you even got a nice little shout out by Pat McAfee on game day. I saw that. But so I do have an interesting situation that I want to address with you in terms of the last 2 years there, because this person is on the staff now. Sean Chambers, everyone talks about it, whether it be pro football or college football. A two quarterback system, if you got two quarterbacks, you got none. You guys, the 2 seasons before that, made it work in. I mean, he was extremely productive, and you have been extremely productive during those seasons. So you kind of debunked that whole saying. What were the factors that made that work, and what's it like having someone that you were so closely tied to the last few years right back working with you as a quarterback's assistant on the team right now, and Sean Chambers.
Yeah, him and I had different skill sets, so to some extent the plays were separated with what he's comfortable with, what I'm comfortable with, and so that made our offense dynamic, unpredictable, and then also just when we were both in there together, that was a necessity because of injury. Really, that wasn't much of a plan at all. But we had like our fourth or fifth string running back at the time because everyone else was hurt, so we had to find a way to get those guys a break, and so we had the two quarterbacks out there at one time, to figure it out because obviously you're both pretty dynamic in the run game. But yeah, I mean, both years, the game plans, stuff like that, just super creative offense was made it super exciting with the two quarterback system. And with him coming back this year, I think he just has such a love for the game and the details with it. And he just wants to invest in the guys that are still here and find a way to win with his coaching staff. He had that connection with Coach Vegan back at Wyoming. He had his own experiences with him, and he was just a guy he wanted to work for, whether that be playing or coaching, obviously. And so he just made the decision to come back to Montana. He loves this place, and left back up to Bozeman and work for Coach Vegan and try to have an opportunity with the coaching career.
So you guys should put on like a master class on how to do that, working with two quarterbacks like that. I think that was awesome to read about. And then finally, in terms of Montana State stuff, just quickly, I'm not asking you to give me a preview on what these games are going to be like this year. Mine's on Utah Tech. I know that. But what do the Gold Rush and Brawl the Wild mean to you? Those are two huge traditions at Montana State that, again, not a lot of people know about. Can you just speak to what those weeks are and what that day's like as someone who's a veteran and has experienced multiple?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gold Rush, it's always just the first home game of the year. They pack out the entire stadium in gold. Certainly, we don't have 100,000 fans like Penn State's whiteout, but to see a gold out there that you get to open the BAC doors, to Metallica blaring, and just a bunch of crazy fans. Super excited to watch some Bobcat football. I think it just brings a bunch of energy. We obviously are going down to St. George this week, but we'll come back up here and have our Gold Rush game that following weekend. And obviously, just a first home game, everybody's excited. Anticipation's super high. But ultimately, the biggest game of the year is certainly the Brawl of the Wild, year after year. And like I said, it's a one or the other here in Montana. You're very split. You're 100% one way or you're 100% the other way, and it's a super bitter rivalry for sure. And I think that game means a lot to us as a program. It means a lot to them as a program. Fans look at that game and really if you lost every single other one and you won that one, they'd be okay with it. And if you won every single other one and you lost that one, the fan base would not be okay with it. And that's truly how it is. But it's awesome. It's just a bunch of Montana kids on both sides of the ball that are certainly fighting for bragging rights to have the opportunity to go back to their home communities, likely with a player from the other team in that same community, and just have guys patting them on the back rather than having to go hide in the. So no, it's year after year. It's the biggest game of the year. It's a ton of anticipation. Typically very high stakes there because it's always the last game of the season. It's also right before Thanksgiving. So again, if you have a bye, it's either have a bye or you have a playoff game or you're done with the season. And likely that game in the past has really dictated all those three situations. So, it really has almost everything riding on it. Conference championship, really, I think every single year so far, it's decided that for us.
Definitely want people to know a little bit more about those traditions. So quickly, starting to wrap some things up, the New Mexico game this past weekend on FS1 national television, week 0. At a few points in the game, you're down 17. Fourth quarter, you're down 17. One quote I got from you in one of the post-game press conferences was, it was a hostile environment with the weather that we weren't expecting to be dealing with. And you kept mentioning the heat and the wind. Which one kind of affected you more between those, and how was it affecting you? And I mean, how did you manage it?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly knew that there was going to be a lot of heat. The altitude would be a little bit higher, but it was as hostile with that sun beating down. It certainly would have to say the heat played a bigger role than the wind. The wind obviously probably almost helped the heat a little bit. So how do we deal with it? I mean, we did practice in the afternoons, tried to get it because we have this about the same altitude here up in Bozeman, and we practice in 80-degree weather, 85-degree weather. But just at a 2 p.m. kickoff, UVs maxed out, sun's blaring on you. There's no overcast at all. And all obviously that first game of the year, adrenaline's going, and you're trying to find any way to just stay hydrated for all 4 quarters, and just to figure out how to deal with some adversity there, not only with the conditions, but obviously with play as well. Just gave us great opportunities to go and make a story of it, and that's certainly what we did.
It was a game full of adversity. It was a comeback story. You took some shots. I mean, we had the 2 sack fumbles in that game. And again, another quote I really liked from you was, "It's unfortunate how those things turn out sometimes. I just believe that's part of what the story was going to be today," and it was. That part of "I believe that's part of what the story was going to be today." Is that something you tell yourself often? Because I love that. When you're in a situation like that, is that something you learned from a coach in high school? Because that's a great thing to preach to younger quarterbacks too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Earlier in one of the interviews, and I talked about it, but it was just a lot of disbelief in my teammates for sure. But there's just a belief in my Lord and Savior that there's a plan out there that was going to play out. And when those things happen, like I said, I can only just stay positive and just believe that those things are going to be part of ultimately what the story is going to be today. Whether we win or lose, that was part of what was supposed to happen. But I always believed we were going to win. Like that's bare none. And so it was just if that's what happened, it's going to be a great story, a great comeback story. It sets up a great opportunity for us to do something really special here today, to come back against an FBS program, show the kind of character we have as a team, and I just believe that the entire time, and I certainly do think that it's a great thing for I wish someone would have told me that when I first started my first game against UT Martin, when those 35-mile-per-hour winds were whipping out there. I was thinking, geez, this is the most unfortunate turn of events possible. Like this is just awful. And at that point, it did become part of the story. Like I said, it was we threw for 50 yards. I think I ran for 200 some yards, but that's what Sam Houston saw. That was the story they got to see. And so, after all this experience that I've had playing here for 3.5 years, you look back and you think, well, those were all part of my story leading up to now, and this is just going to be a continuation of it.
And then finally wrapping stuff up on the New Mexico game, another thing I'd heard you say, I was just calm and I believed in my teammates. Poise to me is the biggest thing for a quarterback to have. It's like the number one quality I think they should have. You hear a lot of quarterbacks before, right before a game or a big drive, they have some sort of process in place. You hear Aaron Rodgers talk about these box breathing techniques or anything like that. Some have some sort of mantras. Do you have any sort of specific process in place before a big drive like that last one in New Mexico that helps you stay calm and poised?
Yeah, I mean, we read a book this last winter, Relentless Solution Focused, and the author has a couple other books that I've read, but he calls it a lock-in drill, and we had a colonel work with us back when Cho was here, and he still does, Colonel Kornichuk. I think he's in Portland, over in Portland now, but it's just his drill. Yeah, there's a breathing component to it. There's a self affirmation statement followed by visualization, and just subtle cues to prepare you for the game. And those are things I do every single day to try to just make sure I'm as gauge as possible, and just believe in myself, and see things being successful. And just a product of that is that when the games come, and it comes down to that situation that you've already visualized it. You already believe that you can make these different throws and really just run an offense. Protect yourself, find ways to get in a good, the best situation you possibly can, given what they're running against your look. And we've had a lot of 2-minute drills through all of camp, and through my 3.5 years now here. I was just going up and down the sideline, just telling everyone, believe, 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 because we were going to win this game. And even with the penalty that brought us back to the 11-yard line rather than whatever it was, like the 35 after the big punt return, we were going to be at the 35 or 40, and a holding call that I haven't looked at all on special teams brought us back to the 9, or I think the 11-yard line. So we had to go 89 yards in a minute, or I don't know, 2 minutes, a minute 30 something minute.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it was the situation. We ran through it multiple times, and just guys believing.
Now, just some quick hitter questions just to get to know you a little bit better, maybe get to know Bozeman. So real quick, I always think it's really cool to get a look into what a quarterback's pregame routine is. I think it says a lot about them as a football player. Any sort of little ritual you go through? I know you just described a few things, but like specifically to pregame, maybe the night before, anything specific you can kind of go through?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of knocked on it there throughout the entire week. Certainly practice is rigorous, but there's components that are visualization. Seeing the stadium, hearing the fans, seeing the play call get called in, thinking through your thought process of your reaction to it. It's a situation. Does your heart drop because you get nervous, or do you force yourself, to see the positive and see the opportunity with it, and making sure that that's every single play. There shouldn't be one that it's called and you're thinking, oh, this is not what I wanted to see. Ultimately then on Saturday you wake up and you get our lock-in drill before you go out there for the game that I just described, the breathing technique, followed by the self-affirmation statement, the visualization, and then the cues to success, and then following up with one last breathing technique. It just takes, 5 minutes, and then you're locked in, and really just a couple breathing techniques throughout the game to make sure that you're where you want to be. Your mind's got to be where it's supposed to be.
And then finally, just some questions around Bozeman. I'd ask you what your hobbies are outside of the building, but just want to kind of get to know what's the most Montana hobby you're doing when you're outside of the football building? Hiking, fishing, you got to have something. You're a Montana kid.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do love hiking. We have so many different places over here in Bozeman. Fishing, I'm not really too big of a fisherman or hunter. I know a lot of guys are, and I want to go out with them. But hunting for sure is just few and far between during football season. You don't really get the opportunity unless you want to go out on a Sunday when the body is not feeling too good. So maybe a little bit of fishing over the summer, hiking, camping, and I've been just starting to try to figure out how to play golf. This football game is not going to be forever, and I'm going to be competitive my entire life. So figure out how to do that, so I'm not completely awful.
Yeah.
But there's some
Um,
nice golf courses out here.
oh, I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are. And then finally, when I'm eventually in Bozeman, because I'm definitely going to catch a game out there at some point in my life, what's the go-to food spot or spot in general there in town that I got to check out?
In Bozeman, that's unique to Bozeman. Let's think here. I am a huge breakfast guy, so there's so many different places around town. Western Cafe, Storm Castle, Main Street over Easy, and Jam. Those are all four great breakfast places. I just love breakfast, so any of those. Western Cafe gives you more of a Montana feel for sure, but all four of those places are pretty good.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time today, Tommy. This is going to be a huge year for you guys, pulling for you guys. You got Utah Tech coming up, and I'll be keeping tabs.
Thank you, I appreciate you.